Welcome to the TNF podcast. Like, comment, share, subscribe, click on that bell for notifications. And if you are listening on Spotify or Apple Music, give us a follow, give us a rating. That would be most excellent. All right. So upcoming shows we've got for you on the 2nd of April at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. That's a Wednesday. Gregory James Thomas from End and The Risk Taken and Misery Signals. On the 6th of April, 5 p.m. Eastern Time, Peter Edge from Inclination and Two Witnesses. That's also a Sunday. And on the 13th of April at 5 p.m. Eastern Time, we've got Jeff Gretz from ZAO and From Autumn to Ashes. That's also a Sunday. And as you can see at the bottom here, I've got an official merchandising company, Hell's Heart Merch Co. Go on over to hellsheartco.bigcartel.com. Use the code 20 for 20% off of your entire order. Fine Bella Canvas t-shirts, tri-blend, 50% polyester, 25% cotton, 25% rayon. They feel amazing. If you like hardcore and you like film, you'll definitely like what we have to offer. So check it out. All right. So my next guest today, really awesome dude. I had the pleasure of meeting him at one of his shows in South Carolina. We had some mutual friends, and his band has been greatly influential upon me. It was one of the first metalcore bands that I discovered when I was about 16 years old. The album Where Blood and Fire Bring Rest totally blew my mind. It was a game changer for me. It was a game changer for many other folks. He's currently working in video animation and that whole realm and industry. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, Russ Cogdell from ZAO. What's going on, man?
Not too much. How are you today?
Dude, I'm awesome. And thank you so much for being here.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure.
And so, you know, with musicians, I typically ask them, what was your earliest memory of music? Did you have family members that played music? And did you play in a school band? What was your first concert that was maybe a non-metal hardcore concert? And then how did that seg into getting into hardcore and metal?
Yeah, so I actually had uncles on both sides of my family that were musicians. My uncle Kenny, actually, he played both guitar and he played drums in the church band. And I was really little at the time, and I remember bringing my sticks to church and banging on the pews, and so he was a really big influence on me. And actually early on, he allowed me to borrow like his acoustic guitar, and that was like pretty much before I had a guitar. I had the opportunity to to kind of play around and to learn, and he taught me how to play bar chords and whatnot. A relative on my dad's side, his name is Winston Carter. He's in this band called Brother to Brother, with like brother to the number 2 brother. But he's an amazing like jazz guitar player, and like his work is influential, and he's a better guitar player than I'll ever be. So but having those sort of 2 core family members sort of influenced me, and kind of gave me like the itch to want to play music and to start my own bands pretty early on. I first got my guitar. Actually, I'm a drummer by trade, so I know I've been in ZAO and have played guitar for that's what people kind of know me for, but I'm a way better drummer than I am a guitar player. But I still love playing guitar. But yeah, I started really kind of getting into playing drums and playing guitar at the age of like 14 and whatnot. And it's funny too, because the street that I grew up on in Greensburg, there's a bunch of different musicians. My friend Mike Laughlin, who's played with Scott in Creation's Crucifixion. He also played drums for Cattle Decapitation for many years. He lived on this street, so it was a lot of we just had so many people on my block that just either played drums or played in bands, and so it was just it was a pretty natural thing to kind of fall into.
I did not know you were a drummer.
Yeah.
That's wild, man. Did you ever do any of the drumming on any of the ZAO records, like on particular tracks? Like when, I know Jesse used to be the drummer and I know Jeff is currently the drummer, but did you ever get to exercise your chops on any of the tracks in the studio?
No, not really in the studio per se, but excuse me. Very early on, I'd say, in between like, 97 through whenever I left for college. So that was 97 through like 2000. Sometimes we would kind of like, rotate instruments, or I would, play play a song or two, and Jesse would play guitar. We just kind of swap, and it'd be kind of fun and, improv.
Now, you were playing guitar, with your, what was your first, like, concert as far as non-metal hardcore concerts? What do you remember as far as that's concerned?
Yeah, well, it's a little embarrassing to say, but I saw Dave Matthews Band when I was like 14 or 15 years old. That was like my first real concert. I mean,
that is not embarrassing, sir. Musically, all right. I've always went to bat for Dave Matthews Band because they've got kind of like a frat boy, like sorority girl like association or whatever. But musically, those guys are on point. Yeah, those guys are so good at what they do. So you went to Dave Matthews Band. Did you have a good experience with it?
Yeah, I mean, it was it was, I mean, it wasn't like, essentially like life changing. Oh, I gotta, I want to, write something similar to this, but just the, just it exposed me to, to sort of like the live atmosphere of like, or just seeing, or hearing those songs live, and, was just a different experience than like actually sitting in my bedroom and, listening to a CD and whatnot. So.
Yeah, definitely. I'll go ahead and admit I owned a copy of Under the Table and Dreaming when I was younger. So just saying, it's a good album. It's a really good album. Satellite, good song, like it a lot. And so how did that, you had members, you had friends that played in bands that you lived near. So how did were they the ones that got you involved as far as like, bringing you to shows, or, who were some of your earliest, metal and hardcore influences?
Yeah, so Western Pennsylvania, like especially back in early 90s, early mid 90s, there were a lot of weird bands that were kind of coming through, and they were, some of them were metal, some of them were sort of like there's this one band in particular, they're called Puritan. I don't think they're not around anymore, but they were very like I didn't really understand, like, I mean, seeing them for the first time, we're just like, oh my gosh, like this is like, it's more than just the music. There's emotions involved. I remember, like the band members like crying on stage and kicking each other and kicking each other, and I feel as if like, seeing Puritan, Creationist Crucifixion, Scott's band, I mean, they were a huge influence on, like, especially like my writing style. And then they, their stage presence was always just, insanely like over the top. And there was another band called Abnegation. They were kind of northwestern Pennsylvania. But them, it was just, and, they would come through all the time. And we had... there was this one venue, was called Illusions. It changed their name, or the venue changed the name to Planet Bubba at one point. But I mean, that's where we used to go, like on the weekends, and I played there, a ton of times with my old band, Sower. We changed our name to Seasons in the Field, but Dan Wyant was actually in that band too. But yeah, just kind of being like, in that crowd, and it really had a great impact on the way that, I play music, I write music, and perform music as well. Yeah,
I remember Abnegation. I'm not familiar with too many of those other bands, but yeah, I was told that Pennsylvania had a pretty, that area of Pennsylvania had kind of a bustling scene at one time. And, it's interesting because I know one of ZAO's claims to fame is that they come from the same town that they use the mall in Dawn of the Dead. And
Yeah,
I've always found that to be really fascinating.
yeah, yeah. That's that mall is actually located in Monroeville, maybe about 30 minutes from here. I haven't been there in such a long time, but I don't know if you've seen the our documentary, The Lesser Lights of Heaven. You know, there's like a one of the opening scenes is like, you know, me and Dan in front of the mall, and we're talking about it and just, you know, just being goofballs.
I'm a big fan of that film. I definitely love zombie movies. That's, you know, the Romero movies, Lucio Fulci, all that stuff. It's,
Yep.
you know, big impact to me. So I always found that to be kind of a cool tidbit. Now with the formation of ZAO, Scott was on this show before, but how did you played with Dan in, you said it was Seasons in the Field, and then what, you guys kind of linked up with Jesse and the other guys, or, you know, how did that whole genesis come about?
Yeah, so you know, like I had mentioned, actually, yeah, ZAO was one of the you know, those bands that would, you know, occasionally, you know, play you know, in the Trove at Illusions, and then we eventually just kind of, you know, became friends you know, after a while, and essentially when Seasons in the Field kind of, you know, dissolved, you know, Jesse kind of approached, you know, me, Dan, and Brett after the whole split with you know, the Splinter Shards guys, to ask us to, you know, and see if we were interested in pursuing, you know, being in the band, and we just kind of all hopped on board.
It's such a drastic change from Splinter Shards to Where Blood and Fire Bring Rest, you know, because I remember my first exposure to ZAO was through like the songs from the Penalty Box samplers that Tooth and Nail Solid State used to do. And I remember you guys had already, you know, Where Blood and Fire Bring Rest came out, I think it was 97, 98, something like that.
Yeah,
and there
in 96, and I think it came out in 98.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. What's the reason for why did it take so long for it to be released?
Well, I think we were writing it in 97, or did I say 96? I meant 97.
Okay, 97. All right.
97, and then, you know, I mean, that whole album was recorded in 7 practices, you know, if that. I mean, it was you know, everything was kind of moving really quick. And yeah, I mean, I'm just surprised, you know, that it turned out the way that it did, and that, you know, it was received well. So
it's an amazing album. But what I was going to say was that, you know, with the songs from the Penalty Box, like there's such a sonic shift from Splinter Shards to Where Blood and Fire Bring Rest. Was that kind of just as a result of the influences that you guys had, or was that more like a conscious decision? Like Jesse was like, I don't want to play this kind of style anymore. I want to go into a more like metal, like Carcass kind of influence sound.
no, I mean, yeah, we were, you know, always sort of influenced by like Carcass, Neurosis, you know, those type, Crowbar, you know, those types of bands. But it was definitely not a conscious decision. It was just more or less like, this is, you know, this is how I write. You know, I'm going to bring these riffs, or I'm going to bring these ideas, or, you know, Jesse is going to bring these ideas, and same with Brett. I think a lot of the, I think back then we were kind of aiming more for a, you know, to write more simplistically. And I think that kind of like shows, you know, throughout the album. You know, for instance, you know, the song Lies the Serpents, A River of Tears, you know, the way that song was written, like Jesse just did like the dun, 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 you know, double bass part. And then me and Brett were just following his, his double bass. And then we just kind of, we wanted to sort of do the slides and feel as if like we're writing something kind of sort of heavy like Neurosis. But yeah, I mean, I think it was kind of, we were just kind of geared on, you know, writing something more simplistic than like, you know, something complicated like, you know, Suffocation or something like that.
Yeah. And, you know, I definitely see the Neurosis influence. I know that Jesse has talked about that being, you know, a band that was hugely kind of influential in the sound of ZAO. and then you guys did, and I mean, I want to say, like, that album kind of just took everybody like by surprise. We were so floored by it, and I think it's still, even today, like, bands still emulate that sound to some degree, and I think that, yeah, like I said, just a game changer, just a huge step in like almost a different direction for hardcore and metal. And then, you guys did Liberate Ex Inferius, and that album, I think, still kind of continued along with the trajectory of the previous album, but then you guys started doing melody and other things. And were there periods with the band where you did try to consciously sound like somebody else, or was it, again, just more of like a natural byproduct of whatever you were listening to at the time?
No, unfortunately, we were, I'd say with like records like Liberate, unfortunately, like the way that the writing process happened, it was like whatever you had, you present it, and you hope it stuck. And I think if you listen to songs like, Savannah, like it is like you listen to like Scott's parts and like, and my parts, and nothing really matches up, but it kind of does sort of. But there's it's kind of total chaos. And, the structure for the song Savannah it's pretty chaotic and, in your face and whatnot. And so I think we eventually had to just learn how to like, to dismantle like that sort of like mindset of, oh, I got to get my part in, or I want to, I have this cool riff and I hope everyone likes it. And then, unfortunately, it's like, we weren't really serving the song, but somehow we were able to make something happen that sounded cool. But and I think eventually, like now, me and Scott, when we write, it's not like a formula, but we kind of understand each other to the point where it's like, okay, it feels natural for this thing to go, in this sort of direction. But yeah, back then it was just pure like, oh, I just want to get my stuff heard and, hope that everything kind of works out, or like that, everyone likes my riff. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And, with that album, I definitely remember, because early on in ZAO's career, you guys were associated with the Christian hardcore and metalcore scene. And I remember there was a huge controversy because in the liner artwork of that album, Jesse had tattoos of like pinup girls. And, there was a whole thing where they couldn't distribute the albums at Christian bookstores because of the artwork. So there had to be like an alternate take on the artwork. How did you feel about that?
I mean, I just thought it was kind of silly, but I think you're right. It was like a pinup girl tattoo that he had. I think that's kind of why they, chose to produce an alternate, insert, for, with his picture and stuff in it. But no, that wasn't really like we were just kind of focused on, how good is the album doing this week, in sales and touring. I mean, we toured a whole lot back then, months at a time. So, I mean, that was kind of like our general focus.
Yeah. I saw you guys at Cornerstone in 2000, and I remember that being crazy. And I think Dan was playing bass at that show.
Yeah, he was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You guys were in the process of searching for a bass player, and I thought it was amazing. I really enjoyed that show. With you guys did a few albums for Solid State, and I remember that I heard that you guys got locked into some sort of like stupid contract with them to where it was so many albums, and then you guys had to do some other albums in order to be released from the contract. Does that check?
Yeah, it was I think the contract was for 5 records. I'm not sure if that. Blood and Fire, Liberate, self-titled, Pray to Chaos, and then yeah, that's right. So and the Splinter Shards album. So because that the contract was actually signed during when they first signed on, or ZAO first signed on, was and produced the Splinter Shards album. But yeah, it was the nature of the contract wasn't great at all, and we were kind of locked into it. And I mean, everything is kind of we have a good relationship with Tooth and Nail Records now. I mean, we've been able to go back and repress or press Blood and Fire and like Liberate to vinyl, even self-titled as well. So there's no real bad blood. It was just I mean, when you're a kid and you're in a band and you're just happy to get some money and some support and be on a label. So
yeah, put some records out there, put your art out there, definitely. Yeah, self-titled was also. I was in the military when I heard that album, and it was funny because one of the guys I was stationed with, he showed me. He was like, "ZAO's got a new album." I'm like, "Really?" And they were like, I listened to it, and it was, again, you guys made these like such sonic shifts in your sound, and it was like always developing and always growing. And you guys started to use electronic instruments and programming and things like that. What was kind of the inspiration for that? Like as far as bands musically, do you remember at the time?
Yeah, I mean, the whole electronic vibe from self-titled. I mean that mostly originated from like Jesse, kind of like he had bought like a like a Korg synthesizer back then. So I think. I mean, he was listening to like bands like Marilyn Manson and whatnot, and so he wanted to sort of incorporate those types of influences into within that that record. But yeah, I mean, for the most part, it was him that kind of drove that like sort of vibe for that album.
Yeah, I love it, man. It's different, but in a great way. You guys still kind of maintain that original sound and still kind of implemented newer elements into it, which I really appreciated about it. And then you guys did you had left Solid State and you did The Funeral of God, which a lot of people were like aghast at, because they were like, oh, like this is a sacrilegious title or blasphemous or something like that. But it was actually kind of a concept album.
Yeah.
In that it was like, what if God had left existence or something like that? Is that accurate?
Yeah, it was, what if God, kind of removed himself from the picture and gave everyone the choice to just live how they wanted. And that was pretty. I mean, it was a basic concept, but you're right. I think that the title was like a sort of like it held some like had like a shock value, and so you were just like, what is this? I remember. I mean, I remember talking to Dan and and he was telling me about some songs that he was working on, and that title stood out to me. And I remember I told Scott, or I called Scott. I was like, Dan has a really cool title or cool song that I think that we're gonna love for this next record, and then we just kind of went with that, but kind of worked out.
And would you say that was also kind of in response to, and Scott also talked about your disassociation from the Christian metalcore hardcore moniker. Do you think that was kind of a byproduct of that? Like you were saying, hey, we're kind of done with this?
I don't think that we were super conscious about it, but because honestly, like we weren't a ministry-based band for a long time. I mean, well, at least since I don't know, maybe 2000. I mean, it was like when we used to tour, during like the Blood and Fire, Liberate era. I mean, especially Blood and Fire. I mean, there were a lot of like Christian kids coming to our shows. Mostly. I mean, we were, we weren't really broken out into like the secular market, which is kind of funny to say now. But I mean, back then, you had, we had like altar calls and, Dan giving like, sort of like, these sort of like spiritually influenced, like just message, to kind of, present to the crowd. And it was more sort of Jesus centric back then. But yeah, as time went on, I mean, it just kind of became less and less. I mean, it's like how we used to play, churches, and then we finally started playing like, real actual venues, and less of the churches. And so it eventually kind of naturally faded itself out.
I know there's a few practitioners still in the band, but how does the band collectively feel about Christianity? Do they? I mean, because I know some people don't have a good opinion of it, like if they were involved in it. But would it be safe to say that you guys are kind of more like, whatever. If it works for you, then great.
Yeah, I mean, I don't condone anyone that chooses to maintain their beliefs as a Christian. I mean, I think, me personally, I don't actively go to church, but I still hold on to those values. And I'm thankful for that, because that's, kind of how, that was how I was raised in the church. But I tend to, I listen to this, his name is Gary Wayne. He's a Christian contrarian. That's what he kind of calls himself, which just means that, like, he wants to verify the sources for himself rather than like relying on, what someone tells them about something.
Sure.
But he spent like the last 30 years, researching, a lot of what, he's got 2 books out right now. His one book is called the Genesis 6 Conspiracy, which, Genesis 6 pretty much talks about, how the 200 angels from heaven fell to Mount Hermon, which is like it's like the tallest peak in Syria. And they procreated with human women and gave birth to, giants, the Nephilim. And so that is why, and this is, something that I, like me growing up in the church, like, you hear about giants, but you don't really understand, like, that sort of part. Well, in my opinion, I didn't know that there were more giants, outside of, just, Goliath. And, but yeah, there were tribes of giants back then. And then essentially, the whole world was corrupted, and that's the reason why God sent the flood. But I guess I say that to say, I really like listening to Gary Wayne. He kind of like expands my knowledge. It helps me to understand parts of the Bible that that is just really just kind of odd sounding, or just kind of complex sounding, and he really kind of dumbs everything down. I mean, he's got his brain is just full of just crazy knowledge. But as far as the other guys go, I know Marty actively, he's involved in the church. I think he's working on a worship album right now too, which is kind of interesting.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, I'm just, I don't condone anyone that still has those beliefs, but with the whole ZAO thing, we're just trying to do the best that we can, actually.
Sure. Yeah. No, you're viewing things through a different lens. Yeah, I definitely get that. And I guess you could say, like, I was definitely influenced by some of those bands to pursue spirituality. I'm not a Christian at present. I practice an Eastern form of religion, but I'm able to view things through a bit of a different lens. Like, I don't like abscond anybody for having a higher power or spiritual beliefs. I think that if it enriches your life and it makes you a better person, provided that it doesn't harm anybody else, then great, But I know that there were periods in my life where I had animus towards it, and I had nothing but hatred. And I'd say my kind of view of that has changed as I've gotten older and matured a little bit. Gary Wayne, Christian Contrarian. That sounds really interesting. I'm gonna have to check that out.
Yeah, if you just log on to YouTube, he usually does three or four podcasts like every week. So I mean, there's tons of of his podcasts out there on YouTube. That's it's pretty fascinating.
Yeah, definitely. And you had made the move to California a while back, and you were working in video and doing animation and that whole industry. What sort of piqued your interest to get involved in that?
As far as like film and video production, animation.
Yeah.
I mean, I was always just influenced by movies as a kid growing up, and that's pretty much when I first stepped down, stepped away from the band. This is back in August of 2000. I ended up enrolling into college, this college called Full Sail in Orlando, Florida.
Yeah.
Got my degree, associate's degree in film and video production. And so, but it's kind of funny because when I graduated and came back, I ended up like comping on like a couple of different productions. I worked on this like 16 millimeter film as a grip, and then worked as a PA on some 35 millimeter film, and then there was just like no work, and I didn't know where to go, and so I ended up joining the band again, and pursued that for a couple of years, and then started freelancing and mostly doing weddings around like the 2005 era, shooting weddings, editing weddings, and then sort of evolved and into sort of the animation side of things, and picked up learned Adobe After Effects and Cinema 4D, which is like a 3D program. Because I was doing a lot of work for, eventually I was doing a lot of work for say like advertising agencies, and I really wasn't getting like, just creative wise, I was unfulfilled, and so that's what kind of led me to start learning new programs, and I do a lot of 3D modeling too, and but yeah, it was just like more of an outlet for me to be creative and to sort of expand my knowledge and to kind of I guess evolve per se. So
sure, yeah, absolutely. What do you feel like are some? And we talked about this a little bit before. You said not much of a David Lynch fan, which is kind of contrary to the rest of ZAO, which sure. I get it. I understand totally, because there's some David Lynch stuff that I have seen that's just like a slog, like Inland Empire. Don't get it. I don't get it. I don't know anybody who really... I know there's like diehard Lynch fans out there that appreciate that film, but I don't understand it. I don't know why anyone would find it alluring or anything like that. But like, you had mentioned Twin Peaks, and I'm a big fan of Elephant Man and, Eraserhead and Blue Velvet and whatnot. But what do you feel like are some, directors and films that really kind of inspired you as far as, early on in youth, and then even much later on? Like, what do you feel like is, are some good up and coming films and filmmakers?
Mm-hmm. So I guess here's another aspect of like my sort of like taste in like film and whatnot. Despite me being a visual effects artist, or I cannot watch, like, it is extremely hard for me to watch any sort of like movie with like heavy visual effects, because I'm looking at it from like a critical point of view, and it's just like, okay, well, this is kind of how they're compositing these images together, or this animation together, and it just I'm completely sucked out of the storyline. And so I guess in contrast, I really love the director Todd Solondz. He directed Welcome to the Dollhouse.
Happiness.
Yeah, Happiness.
I will not watch that movie again. I will not. If you know, folks. If you've seen it, Anyway, Todd Solondz, yeah.
My favorite film of his is it's this film called Palindromes. And
okay.
I don't want to really spoil it, because but it's a very weird concept, and you know, the main character, you know, kind of, you know, it's just the story does something that you just don't expect, and it takes like maybe 30 minutes to realize really what's going on and who's who, and then that's what I really like about it. Well, that's one aspect, but then the second aspect is the fact that, you know, it's more focused on like conversations. Like the camera is just there to give you a perspective, you know, into, you know, what is happening, you know, in this scene, as opposed to like, you know, making something polished or doing some sort of, you know, elaborate, you know, camera move. And that's what I like. I like sort of like static cameras and, you know, a very simplistic, more indie style film. That's kind of more of my vibe. I do like, I mean, one of my other, actually probably my second favorite movie is Dancer in the Dark. I really
with Bjork.
Yeah, I really like
Lars von Trier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I also like, and I'm gonna blank on his name, but I think he's a Greek director. Now he's kind of more mainstream. But have you ever seen the movie Dogtooth?
Yeah, Yorgos Lanthimos. Yeah,
Yorgos. Yeah, I can never say his name.
Yeah, I don't even think I'm saying it right.
That's another one of my favorite films. I mean, it's just it's different. Just the concept of like, okay, well, you have these, you know, this family. There's, you know, two girls, you know, one boy, but you know, they're essentially in their 20s, but they're still living at home, and then the parents are sort of, they've been manipulated since, you know, they were, you know, little, and telling them that this is this thing, stay away from, you know, this cat, but it's not called a cat, it's called something different. But then it gets weirder because because they're getting older and, you know, developing, like they have sexual needs, and so then they, you know, bring over the babysitter to sort of take care of that for, you know, all of the kids, and it just gets weird, and you know. Yeah.
Definitely a weird film. Definitely, he's an interesting director, though. He did that film that was after that. It was about the gymnasts or something, and Baps, was that what it was called?
I don't know if it was the Baxter. It's been a while since I've seen that movie, but
okay,
he did the one. It was like a almost like an AA type of like group. It's called the Alps, I think it was.
Alps, yeah. I did see that one. Yeah.
I think that one came after, which I like too. I mean, it's equally as depressing. I think it's less violent, but you know.
Yeah, but, I'm with you though on the whole, like, you know, the kind of low key, like lo-fi minimalistic stuff. And you know, I was going to ask you if you liked any of the A24 stuff, and then, you know, Yorgos actually did The Lobster and like The Killing of the Sacred Deer, and those came out on A24. And you know, back to Dogtooth, I loved the part whenever they did the little dance or whatever. Like they didn't know how to dance, and they just made up their own dance, and they were playing guitar or whatever. I thought it was really charming. I liked that about it. But I'm with you though, man. I think like stylistically, films that are kind of more, you know, tuned down a little bit are kind of more my vibe as well. I do get into some of the like some of the grander movies every so often, but I mean, like, I even feel like Stanley Kubrick is kind of like, he's very minimalistic at times. Like he's got a lot of like some bombastic stuff going on, but he's really dialed in, and he's really honed into performances and like the psychological aspect. Like I was talking with Dees Casillas, he's a comedian, and we were talking about Clockwork Orange, and like Stanley Kubrick was so adept at having his actors convey an emotion, or, you know, convey an idea, or, you know, something psychological without actually saying anything, but just, you know, really just hanging on that shot, and just, you know, like what is Malcolm McDowell thinking right now? What is Matthew Modine thinking right now? You know, like it's really, I think he was so adept at that.
Yeah, it's kind of comparable to like, say like Sergio Leone's work, camera work, and have you seen Once Upon the Time in the Old West? And it's just
Oh man,
the shots like,
my least favorite Sergio Leone movie.
oh
I had this
yeah,
conversation with
oh,
somebody. I know, but as you can see, I am a Sergio Leone fan. No,
yeah,
I
exactly.
tried to get through it, man. I need to just I need to take a day where I can just sit with it, because every time I tried to watch it, I would get like 15 minutes into it, and I guess you could attribute this to the fact that I would watch it kind of late at night, and I'd get 15 minutes into it after Henry Fonda. I don't want to spoil it for anybody, but
Yeah.
nah, I won't spoil it for anybody. But after the part that, like, the big kind of crazy part at the beginning, I always kind of lost interest. And like, to me, like, the Dollars trilogy is a little bit more engaging, But I there's aspects of Once Upon a Time in the West I like the beginning of it, whenever Charles Bronson shows up. I really like that because it's all visual storytelling,
Yeah.
and that's something you don't really see very often
No,
anymore.
not really. And I was, I grew up on, Western films. I mean, like one of my sort of favorite, like, film genres. My parents always had Westerns on in the house. They still do, like, during the week and whatnot. So, I was, I was, big fan of, Clint Eastwood, John Wayne. And, it's just, it's funny too, because, what I like about, like, I mean, there's so many good movies that, like, I'm still discovering, like, that came out like in the past. And it's just like, I'd rather discover, like, it's like, Frank Capra's, like, filmography, like Arsenic and Old Lace. I remember discovering that for the first time, many years ago. And I just couldn't believe that, like, for a movie that came out in, the 50s and whatever, like, how, comedic it still was, decades later. So I really like kind of going back and discovering. I mean, I love, like, Alfred Hitchcock and, his sort of, angles of suspense and whatnot. I think Dial M for Murder is probably one of my favorites of his.
Yeah.
Yeah, Strangers on a Train. That's a good one too. I really like that.
Oh yeah. I just watched that with a friend, and the great thing about Hitchcock is, like, there's a lot of the things about it are almost like, I don't want to say convoluted, but there's a lot of moving parts to where if those, like, one thing goes differently or one thing goes awry, like, the whole part where he's playing tennis and he's got to win so quickly so he can get to the amusement park to stop. I don't want to ruin it for anybody. You got to watch Strangers on a Train, though. But, like, a lot of it seems really implausible. But, like, he was so, like, adept at, like, like I said, adding those layers and themes. And, like, the more you watch Hitchcock's films, like, the more you kind of notice, like, you're like, oh wow, never noticed that. Oh wow, never noticed that. Have you ever seen Experiment in Terror, Blake Edwards?
No, I haven't actually.
Oh, highly recommend that one. It was Blake Edwards who did the Pink Panther movies, but it's, like, completely tonally different from those. It's very, like, it's almost got, like, a German expressionist feel to it, and it's very, like, kind of noirish and way ahead of its time. I was like, I can't believe this movie was made in the 60s, like, it seems like it would have been something that came, like, 30 or 40 years later. It's just so, like, it's mind-blowing. I really think you'll enjoy it.
Nice. I'm a big fan of Peter Sellers and the Pink Panther movies. And what's that what is that other movie called with Peter Sellers? It's the one where he's the gardener, like Chauncey, Being There.
Being There? Yeah.
That one's really good too. I like that movie.
Yeah, I watched it once. I mean, I'm a big Clouseau fan, so, like, anytime he's doing, like, harebrained or bonkers shit where he's just falling down and, like, I think he's really adept at the whole, slapstick aspect. I don't know if you caught Nosferatu.
Yeah. No, not the new one. No, I haven't actually.
Okay. Have
Yeah.
you seen I mean, I'm sure you've seen the one from the 20s, but have you ever seen the Werner Herzog one from the 70s?
I believe so. Yeah, it's been a very long time since I've seen it, but yeah.
Yeah, one of my favorites. It very like, very kind of. The new one is a little bit. I mean, it relies heavily on visuals, but I think it does a good job at like establishing mood and like
Mhm.
the actually the threat of Dracula or Orlok or
Yeah.
whatever they call him, and I don't remember what they call him. I think it's Orlok in that film, but it
Yeah.
very kind of moody, and Klaus Kinski is just he's great in everything he does, So yeah, big fan of that film. Kind of back to ZAO a little bit.
Mhm.
I remember when you guys did the Crimson Corridor, and I'm always interested in what you guys are doing as far as new releases and stuff, because there'll be a time where you do an album and then there's a lapse of a few years, and then it was like, oh, Crimson Corridor, new ZAO album. And
Yeah.
when I heard Into the Jaws of Dread, I was blown away, because I was like, to me it was like unlike anything you guys had ever done,
Mhm.
and I was like, I would love to hear more of this. Do you think there's any plans to kind of do more of that sound in any sort of future releases?
Yeah, I would say so. There's probably a really good chance of that. You know, we're all sort of into the kind of like the post rock vibe, like most, a lot of people are nowadays. But yeah, I mean, I really love sort of doing those like, intros, and especially with like something like with, Into the Jaws of Dread. I mean, it sort of has those minimal changes and sort of, evolves and progresses into something that, kind of just, starts out as a seed and then it just kind of explodes at the end. But,
Yeah.
the same riff over and over, which is, just kind of crazy. But I
Yeah.
think kind of what why it has that appeal, because it just, we just kind of, essentially let it evolve and change into something that, what you hear on the Crimson Corridor.
I love it, man. I got to see you guys open your show with it when I was in Greenville, South Carolina, and it's just so powerful and it's so epic. It almost reminds me of like something that could be in a film,
Yeah, yeah, very
I
cool.
love it. I love it. And then you guys just did that recent live at the church.
Hmm. Yeah, so that
What
was,
kind of inspired that?
well, I mean, mostly because of the whole situation with the lockdown and COVID, and we wanted to do something a lot more than just rely on, say, a live stream, and it kind of looked just very, it looks just like you're just streaming it, and nothing went into it. But yeah, that was definitely a big project. I had a heavy involvement within that. Actually, I was the creative director for the actual production. I hired all the the camera operators, lighting guys, and then we have what's it called? The actual the church itself, where we have done recordings, or with the last two records and EPs and stuff. So we used that location, which was literally perfect for for that project. And then I did the actually we had a yeah. So a lot of the guys that did like the post work, the colorist, his name is Alan Stallard, with Doug Helmick that did the edit. That actually came. Those guys came from a company called Animal, which is a company that I've been working with for the past 5 years now. So it was cool to kind of get them on board, because I mean those were like my kind of coworkers, and now that was like the first time that we really got to collaborate on a big project. And then for the because we also released it on Blu-ray, DVD, and CD. I basically produced all the animation or the animated menus for the Blu-ray and the DVD, and then the behind the scenes content too that I edited together, and pretty much just It took me a while. That project should have came out like way earlier than it did, but I kind of sat on it for a while. But at least it's out there now.
Yeah. Oh no, it's great. It looks amazing too. Had you ever done anything like that with ZAO before, like directing any just actual music videos just for a single song?
No, not ever actually. So that was like yeah, that was like, a unique opportunity for me, and I'm glad that the product looks and sounds as good as it did. And I think also what really makes that project unique is the just the songs that we chose, to play. I mean, I don't know when the last time like we played like Ladder Rain was, but it was just that and like Free the Wolf. What else? Yeah, there was just it was a unique selection, and I think that kind of like the fans could really like kind of feel as if like we were kind of pulling songs from like all different eras of the band.
Sure. Yeah, that's kind of like a retrospective. I think that's great, and it does sound and it looks amazing. So I had to ask, like, crazy or funny tour story. What do you got?
Yeah, one in particular comes to mind, but I don't think I can say that right now.
Okay. Maybe an alternate take.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I'm trying to think of something that doesn't involve drinking, but.
Well, I'll tell you what, Sick of It All had a story when they were in Europe, and somebody approached them with a bag, and they were like, I've got a decapitated head in this bag. And they're like, no, you don't. And the guy pulled out a decapitated head, and they were like, oh shit. And I guess they arrested the guy later. But I mean, that one was, you can't transcend that,
Yeah. Wow. No, I mean, I wasn't really like, it's funny because I really didn't, drink early on, like, those early tours and whatnot. But then like as time sort of progressed, and I don't drink hard alcohol anymore. I just stick to drinking wine. But there were times where, I went way overboard. I mean, I can kind of tell it very quietly, but there was this one time that I did a whole bunch of shots, and I ended up, and I was wasted. And so they ended up, at least I got like my own hotel room that night, which was great. But then I don't know, I guess like the hotel door was open, and I ended up getting naked on the bed, and I threw up and started doing snow angels.
Oh no. No. Wow. I guess stick to wine then, right?
Yeah. It's easier.
I'll tell you what, I got wasted on a bottle of wine one time. I was supposed to have a date. It was on my birthday. I was going out with a really attractive girl, and she was late, and I said, just go ahead and give me the bottle. And by the time she got there, I was already blackout drunk. And she just didn't know how to react to that. And she was like, all right, well, we need to get you home, and like she put me in her car with her, and I threw up like 3 or 4 different times in her car. And she was just like, every time I did it, she was like, she was like, so like, couldn't believe I was doing that. And, I called her the next day. I was like, I'm so sorry. I said, I'm so sorry I did that. And I offered to repair. Yeah, I guess a form of repair. I offered to, have her car cleaned out and everything. I was like, detailed. I was like, so sorry. And I met her at the detailing place, and she was like, do you even remember what happened like that? And I was like, not really, but I knew I was not a good boy that night. So, here's me, making up for that. And then I never heard from her again. So bad first impression, but
I do have I do have a story that I can share with you briefly that is very interesting. So this
Okay.
was on. This was this was early on, maybe when Brett was in the band. Yeah, it was definitely when Brett was in the band, and this was on the first day of tour. So I had 104 temperature. I had pneumonia, and
Oh,
I told everyone, I was like, yeah, I guess I can go, because I didn't want to let everyone down, and we had a tour to kind of get through and whatnot. And so
sure.
Dan's like driving the van, and we had some sort of like 15 passenger van back. I forget what it was, but the van's nickname was Boner, of course. And so we ended up like, and I was getting, I was wrecked. I was sick. Like we
Yeah.
ended up like getting pulled over by the cops because we had a taillight out. And this story also involves me getting naked too. So just a fair warning. So I'm like, they pull us over, and I told Dan, I'm like, I'm pooping my pants, like, and so Dan, like, he's like, can he go outside? Because he's literally like, he's sick. He's like, pooping his pants, and so they let me go outside, and I literally ran like on the side of the road where everyone can see me. I just took all of my clothes off and just start, pooping on the side of the road everywhere. And then like I didn't have any like toilet paper or anything. Like I'm literally like it was a mess. It was a whole
dude.
mess. And so then Dan runs out and grabs me a couple of napkins. I wipe my butt in probably other areas too. And then we ended up continuing on, and I think it was at the next rest stop that I had to like throw away a whole bunch of clothes because it's just full of
Oh yeah.
So, but yeah, that was it. And actually, when we got to that show that night, because my fever, I mean, it was like, it was like 104, 105, but that was the only show.
You're almost dead.
Yeah, I know. That was the only show that I ever had to sit down at. So I like sat down, like playing the entire show that day, and that night. And I barely can remember that night because, my pneumonia, I mean, it was just getting worse. But yeah,
Jesus.
that was an interesting start to the tour.
Yeah, I would say so. Wow. Oh, okay. Wow. That's wild. We got a few questions here. Tim Cohen, Trivicrom from 108. Let's go ahead and run these real quick. Russ, can you talk about your favorite guitars, instruments, amps, and pedals that you use in the band? You seem to enjoy the technical sides of things. Do you like to record your music? If so, what?
Okay. Yeah, I mean, one of my favorite guitars that I've ever owned, it was a Gibson Standard. Really wish I still had it, but I ended up selling it to pay for a ring. Now divorced and whatnot, but things happen in life. But yeah, I had like a Gibson Standard from like 2001, had Grover tuners. It was a lemon burst finish. It was beautiful guitar. Actually, I was using that guitar when Scott and I started this band called Jade Meridian back in like 2004 ish, and I also had a Gibson SG too during that time, and it was like a natural like wood finish, and those were like my two favorite guitars. I mean, I love ESP. ESP's been great for us over the years. It fits our sound for what we need. I think we use some kind of Seymour Duncans. Forgive me for not knowing the model or whatnot. And what was so as far as pedals go, we're using Abominable Electronics Hellmouth in conjunction with in my rig. I'm using a GCM 900. It's a 50-watt version. And then both head and cab. And between that and the Hellmouth kind of helps, gives us the gain that we need to kind of do pinch harmonics, and just kind of really drives the sound the sound of that amp. And then everything else is just kind of basic. What else do I have? We have another reverb pedal that I think Abominable made for us, and I use that kind of sparingly throughout like our sets and whatnot. And then to answer his last question, I've always hated like the whole audio engineering side of things. Like I stay out of all that. I mean, the only thing that I do kind of recording wise is, I use Ableton. Sometimes I have this other sort of solo project called Parishes that I do on occasion that I really haven't done a lot with recently, but I write some like sort of like lo-fi, like chill hop music with Ableton. But as far as like on a large scale, like I hate Pro Tools. I don't understand it. It's never been my I like being behind, like I like writing music. I like the recording process. I just I've had no interest in like sort of the engineering side of things.
Sure. Absolutely. Another question he has. Oh, wait, you guys used Paul Reed Smith at one time, didn't you? Because I remember it was like marketed on one of your albums, like the.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
So that was Brett Detter's guitar. He ended up getting a, I don't know, like a partial endorsement from Paul Reed Smith, but he was the only guy that ever used a PRS. But as far as the rest of us, I mean, we used like Fernandez a long time ago.
Oh yeah.
And then that was prior to getting on board with like ESP. But yeah, I mean that's pretty much it.
I played the LTD at one point. I definitely had a few ESPs.
Yeah.
Let's see here. Well, this is a good question. What did you think of Francis Ford Coppola's new film? What are your favorite films of his? Megalopolis. Did you see it?
No, I know nothing about like new films. I mean, like even if I like see the advertisements, I mean, I just have no interest in it. But
yeah,
I think maybe Apocalypse Now might be like one of my favorites. Trying to think, is the no, that's Scorsese. The Deer Hunter is Scorsese, I believe, right?
Scorsese, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'd say Apocalypse Now is probably my favorite Coppola film too. Definitely. Yeah. I heard Megalopolis was a piece of shit though, so I don't know. It's one of those things where you just gotta, as a director, even Scorsese, you just gotta hang it up at a certain point. It's like why are you even trying to? I mean, I don't want to like disparage the guys because they've created some of my favorite films ever. But like, what more do you have to prove? Type thing. Yeah. Like go out on a good note. Type thing. I don't know. It's weird to me. It's very weird. Appreciate you coming, by the way, Terrific Rom. When are you gonna come on the show, man? When are you gonna come on the show, man? You got to do the show. And here's a question that I typically ask: what is one piece of advice that you would give to your younger self?
In general, or just in regards to music? Probably in regards to music, right?
Regards to music or anything. I mean, really.
I mean, I'm thankful for like the person that I was. For instance, I have one of my best friends growing up. His name was Jason Croslin, and like him and like well, his parents were hippies back in like the 60s and 70s, and like I think it was their music collection that really influenced me. Like I don't listen to metal. I don't listen to heavy music. I mean, I kind of grew up on like the Grateful Dead, like Jethro Tull, Jefferson Airplane. I mean, I can name off a whole bunch of other weird folk bands like Pentangle and Bert Jansch and what do you call it?
I will comment, like I've viewed your Instagram stories a few times, and your musical tastes are like groups that I've never even heard of. I'm like, wow, with an interesting sound, like I've always kind of tried to put my finger on it as far as like what genre you would attribute it to, but it almost doesn't have one,
Yeah, I mean, I spent a lot of like my time like discovering new bands, like especially old bands from like 60s and 70s that I've never heard of before. There's a really cool website. It's called everynoiseatonce.com, and it pretty much like contains every genre of music out there. And what's really cool is like there's like a you can kind of hit the scan button, and it'll scroll through like just go to random genres, like vaporwave or like Nigerian.
Love vaporwave.
Yeah, Nigerian rap. You like that? I mean, it's just like
I haven't heard it.
It's all in one.
No, I was saying vaporwave. I love vaporwave.
Oh,
like
yeah,
I got real into that like when I was in LA, because it's like the perfect driving music. It's so good. Yeah.
And it's cool because you can click on the genres, and then like say if it's vaporwave, then like you'll get Telepath, you'll get like George Clanton, you'll trying to think Don Mason, you'll get all these like bands within that genre, and then you can click on that artist and it'll take you directly. It's like a Spotify URL. It'll take you directly to Spotify. So it's one of the primary ways that I discover music. And then I'm a nerd for like cataloging my music like on Spotify. And so I've got like folders within folders within folders within folders, and then you actually get to the album, click on it, and listen to a song. But it's a way to I make playlists too, but I make playlists of every album that I find or discover. That way I have a record of everything that I found, because I can't keep everything all up in here. And then to take it a step further, there is a website, because I'm making all these playlists on Spotify. There's a website called exportify.com, and I basically use Exportify to export CSV files, like Excel, like basically spreadsheets for every playlist that I have on Spotify. And that way I have a record in case Spotify goes down or something else replaces it. Now I have a record of every single album that I've ever found on Spotify.
That's pretty smart, actually. That's really smart. We got one question here. Alan Panameno says, advice for starting to write and record music. Huge fan. Thanks for joining, Alan.
Yeah.
What do you got?
So this is kind of, it's, in my opinion, I write based on feeling. I'm not like like a technical guitar player from like Nick Hippa from As I Lay Dying or whatever band he's in now, or I think it's God Forbid. But I write based on feeling, and I really like experimenting with dissonant chords, and that's kind of where I let things go, and I just kind of change my fingers according to like how I feel, or how I sort of feel that this part should be going. The same thing, because I play a little bit of piano too. It's the sort of the same process with the piano. I really like depressing sounding chords, and but for me, and Scott kind of is a little bit different, because he likes to sort of write alone, but I like to write as a group a lot of the times, because I'm more it helps me to understand the part once I hear the dynamics of the say the drums or the the vocals. But as far as like a bass or something goes, but I really just try to create a mood first, and then figure out and develop like a unique rhythm, or like picking part, and kind of marry those two things together until I find something cool.
I really love those diminished chords too, and like the the dissonant chords. Like that's some of my favorite favorite incorporations into any music. One thing before I forget, back to what you were saying about like listening to music and older genres of music. Mm-hmm. I've definitely been able to kind of appreciate that which comes before, as opposed to that which is presently popular or in the current ethos. And same with movies as well. Like there were definitely movies I loved watching when they were new, when I was growing up, but then I'm like, what influenced this filmmaker? What influenced this director, this actor? Like, I want to see stuff that comes before it. I'm a big into history, so I always like to, you know, kind of like, let's go back to the roots type thing.
Yeah.
I love that. And Alan said, "Thank you. Cool. Well, Russ, what are you working on now? Like, what do you got to promote for us? What do you got in the works?"
I'm just working on a visual effects project right now, which is kind of it's killing me, and I'm you know, not sleeping that much, but I'm kind of getting through it. I can't really get into specifics because it's not out yet, but it's like a product demo. That's pretty much all I can say.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, that's kind of you know, where I'm, you know, what I'm currently working on, and I'm kind of in transition right now, you know, with, you know, just my life in general. I'm kind of back in Greensburg. I was living on the north side of Pittsburgh for about 5 years and had to come back to Greensburg. But yeah, I mean, if anyone knows of any openings for like a animator, that's pretty much the only sort of promotional thing that I have right now, because I'm kind of looking for work. So
anybody, if you need animators, Russ is the man here. Any plans for new ZAO material?
Yeah, definitely. Actually, I think this week Scott and I are going to try to get together and actually do some writing. So yeah, Scott has some ideas. I've got some ideas. I mean, Scott has a catalog. He's always has like a, you know, backlog of like just stuff. And then I've got some, you know, some old riffs, and kind of working on some new ones now too. But it's definitely going to be a lengthy process. I mean, we've got a tour coming out, but I don't think those dates have been announced yet. So I shouldn't say anything about that.
And you guys are doing a 25th anniversary of Liberate at Furnace Fest, right?
Yeah, we are. Yeah, so that should
yeah.
Yeah, it's funny because it's kind of funny to think, because we actually play a lot of songs. Like, you know, we rotate through a lot of songs in Liberate, with the exception of like maybe Desire the End, like Kathleen Barbara, and then there's another one on there too that we haven't played. But we played Man in Cage, Jack Wilson, you know, on a couple of different tours. But yeah, so we're gonna have to go back and like learn those 3 songs, and so it's gonna, you know, it's not super challenging. It's just like, oh, I think that's what I did there, but you know, it should be fun. Yeah.
That was a long time ago, and if you don't play them a lot, then yeah, you gotta brush up on them, definitely. Absolutely. Well, Russ, dude, I want to thank you for being here so much, and I always present the guests with a T-shirt, and if you like these shirts, we have to the audience, we have like a handful of transfers left, and you know, whatever size you want, whatever you want it printed on, but we have here the Liberate Ex Inferius shirts.
That's so cool.
Which,
that's awesome.
Yeah, I was like, why had they never done an Event Horizon type T-shirt? You know, because that's where your guys' biggest inspiration is from. And I was like, I approached Scott, and you know, Scott talked to the band. You guys gave it the go ahead, which I really appreciate. It was a real honor to do the shirt because, you know, like I had mentioned at the top of the show, ZAO is such a huge band for me. So I was over the moon to do it, and there was, you know, a lot of interest in it. So it was great.
Take the time to you know, make that shirt. That's super cool, and I can't wait to get it. So. Yeah,
absolutely. One thing I wanted to mention too before we go is, as far as Event Horizon, you know, they were supposed to have an alternate cut of that, and a lot of the footage ended up being lost. Like it deteriorated as a result of like improper preservation. Had you heard about that?
No, actually, I hadn't actually.
Yeah, there's supposed to be a way kind of gorier cut, and it just didn't. The film was not preserved properly, and so they were going to do some sort of director's cut, and it just got. Yeah, it was not salvageable. So yeah, I was looking forward to that. Still love that movie. Still think it's a great movie. So, everybody, I want to thank you guys for coming to the show. And if you had any questions, I always appreciate Tim Cohen for coming to the show, Terrific Rom, because he's always supporting and he's always got great questions. And anybody else, if this is your first time, thank you so much. If you liked what you heard, click on that like button, click on the subscribe button, click on the little bell for notifications, like the video, comment on the video, and share the video.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I was going to say, if there's any questions, if there's any more questions that anyone has, feel free to hit me up on Instagram, Russ Cogdell, and I answer any questions that you have, or you just want to just say hi or connect. That's where I'm at. Yeah,
please do that, and I'll be sure to post all your information and all the streaming links to ZAO. And do you have some sort of if people are interested in the animation, do you have some sort of online portfolio to where we can direct them to?
Yeah, the URL is vimeo.com/Russ Cogdell.
Perfect. We'll put it here in the comments, and when I'm circulating the video around social media, I'll put that out there as well. And I'm definitely interested. We had spoken about doing some animation stuff, so I'm on board. So, and as I mentioned earlier, got an official merchandising company, hellsheartco.bigcartel.com. Use a code 20 for 20% off your entire order. Check it out. Would love your support. And everybody, I want to thank you guys for coming and supporting. Namaste. Jobless. Be good. Thank you so much, Russ.
Yeah, thank you again. I appreciate it.